I'm working on the quilting, the start of the quilting on this Irish chain quilt. The first thing I'm doing is quilting diagonal lines through the square blocks. I'll go back and do some other quilting in here, but the idea behind doing all these lines first is that I can get a bunch of these pins out. You know, I've got it all pin basted together, and if I get the basic lines quilted through it, I can get all the pins out, and I won't have those to get in my way anymore. I'm using a free motion quilting foot that looks like this. It is a standard side clamping foot, and this type happens to be my favorite now. How this works is when the needle goes up and down, it hits this lever, and that makes the foot hop up a little bit so that it releases the pressure underneath and lets the fabric slide. There's no this machine that I'm using is it's a Singer 66, and the old 60s, and it's also in a treadle. The 66s did not have the ability to drop the feed dogs, so what I do is I set the stitch length down to the lowest level that it'll go, shortest stitch length that keeps it from jumping back and forth, and then I use one of these feet so that the feed dogs really don't make that big of a difference. There's other types of quilting feet that would work. This one, this little bar on top, is what goes up over the feed dogs, and it also makes the foot go up and down and creates that same sort of up and down so that the fabric can slide. I just happen to like this model better. And the other thing is that when doing straight line quilting, a lot of people will use a walking foot, and this has got little feed teeth that as again this part goes over the bar. I don't know if you can see how this when the bar goes up and down, those teeth engage, and so it's sometimes called an even feed foot because it grabs the fabric with the little teeth both on the top and the bottom, and that helps to drag it through evenly, so you don't get theoretically it doesn't create the potential puckering on the top. I find that one of these does just as well. The only thing is you need to regulate the stitch length yourself, and the way that you do that is by how fast you run the machine and move the fabric through. So I think I like this better because I don't know, I feel like I have more control. The walking foot is nice, but I feel that with just this free motion foot, I can get just as good or better control, and it's not so big and bulky, and I can see what I'm doing better. You know, this thing adds quite a big chunk of hardware to your space. The foot that I've got here is pretty small, and it makes it a lot easier to see where you're going. So the other advantage that I see is that with the walking foot, because it's so big, if I'm coming to an area that has a little bit of a pucker in it, I might not see it because that foot is so big and it covers up so much space. With this, I can see where it's coming, and I can kind of use my hands and give it a spread and flatten it out, and it goes away. Now, this is a huge quilt. It's about 96 inches across, and I've got a lot of adjusting and maneuvering to get it to go in and out of this machine. So with this first part, where it's just all these lines, I feel like I'm spending more time than anything just adjusting and maneuvering to get the thing sort of nailed together and ready to do some fancier quilting. And that's what will happen in these bigger areas. I'll probably do a feathered wreath type design in here, and through these other areas, after the lines are in, I'll probably do maybe a scallop around there. So that's the beginning of this. The quilt batting that I'm using for this is a 100% cotton. This happens to be Nature's Touch that I'm using. The backing is a white, good high quality muslin. The thread is 40 weight. It's Presencia brand, and it comes, this particular one is on a big cone. I know you can't see it in the picture, but it's on a cone and into a cone stand. I like that for quilting because it takes a lot of thread to make a quilt, and individual size spools, you run through a lot of them. I have a 90-14 needle in the machine, and as I said, the feed dogs on this don't lower, so they're in, the stitch length is set to the shortest stitch length, but with this kind of foot on, that really doesn't even matter. That really does, the foot itself really does take care of that problem for you. I know a lot of quilters who will sort of roll the quilt up and make it into a sort of a roll, and get so that they can get it under the machine on this end, and then carefully sort of work on one area at a time. I've done that, and there's certainly nothing wrong with it. It makes makes it a little easier to maneuver, maybe, but I feel like I spend more time rolling and adjusting the quilt than I do actually quilting, so I just kind of bunch it up. and it seems to work for me. But if you're more of an organized person or perfectionist, you may want to do the rolling the quilt up into a sort of a long log and just work on one section at a time. Now, the advantage to that, of course, is that you're not wrinkling it up, and it stays perhaps flatter, and probably if you're doing it that way, you're going to have less likelihood of getting puckers in the quilt. And so there's a lot to be said for do as I say, not as I do. So I probably should roll it up, but I don't. I've got a pretty wide border on this too that I'll be quilting in a probably some sort of a feathered pattern, but I think I want to keep the design fairly traditional because this is an antique top. Now, I did a back stitch there, and this old machine, also doesn't have reverse. So, but since I'm free motioning, I can back and forth to get a little bit of a back stitch to finish. Now, it is also common practice to actually leave your thread tails long, thread them onto a needle, and then drive them back into the body of the quilt the way you would with a hand quilting. Now, what I just realized is I ran out of bobbin. I got down to the end there, and I thought I was back stitching, but I didn't have any bobbin. So it ended here. I'm going to have to come back to that spot, start again after I reload the bobbin. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back a little later with some further steps. Once I get the basic lines done, it's no fun to watch me just quilt straight lines. So I'll get my bobbin reloaded, and I'll be back. I got the quilting lines, straight lines done yesterday, and switched machines. Today I've got my Singer, one of my 127s in the treadle. I find it does a better job on curves than the 66 does. So what I'm going to work on are these curved lines that go around the edges of those squares, and I've got a similar setup to what I had before. This is also a machine that doesn't allow for dropping of the feed dogs. So I've got my stitch length at 0. I've got the same type of presser foot in the machine. That lever rides up and down on the needle bar. That is what makes the popping action, so that there's no pressure against the feed dogs. Same thread, 40 weight cotton, 90/14 needle, and so the idea is around each of these I do a little arc, and will go up and then back down, and that connects the square. This machine is different in that it uses these long bobbins, and the bobbin case is different. Let me show you one. Here's one out of a different machine. So the bobbin looks like a little bit of a barbell, and that's the bobbin case. Some people call it a bullet, but the bobbin goes in, and then there's a groove along the side. The thread goes through that, and then up, and that's and the thread folds out like that. So that's a bobbin case, and the way the bobbin looks on this machine. The actual function of pretty much all sewing machines is the same. There's a hook in there that catches the thread as the bobbin comes around. Some of them rotate, and in this case, that bobbin rides back and forth in a track on there. But the actual mechanism that picks up the stitches is pretty similar. But for whatever reason, the hook mechanism on my 66 machine, the one I had in yesterday, doesn't like as much when I curve. If I go in straight lines, I get beautiful stitches. When I start curving, it wants to break the thread, and there's a lot of potential reasons for that, and I probably just need to spend some more time adjusting and fiddling with it. I think it's more likely than not that it's a tension problem. But today I decided, rather than mess with it for a lifetime, it's just easier to put a different machine in. And it's one of the things about having a bazillion machines, I find anyway, that certain machines are better for certain tasks, and it's nice to just be able to switch. Now, that's not to say that one machine can't do everything. If you've got a new fancy machine that does a million things and does them well, that's great. I enjoy working on these old machines, and they don't all perform every task as well as others. So anyway, for this particular type of stitching on this quilt, this is a combination that's working for me. This Singer 27, this foot, and I've had other quilts with different fabric and different batting, where I found that one of my other machines works better. So I guess it's when I'm I'm starting out one of these with one of these old machines, it's sort of a matter of trial and error. And I imagine that's the case with a newer machine too, that with every quilt you've got different fabric, you might have different batting, you might be doing a different quilting pattern, you've got different thread. So I would always expect that you're going to have some adjusting to do. You're going to need to adjust your tension, you're going to need to do some testing and find out what settings are going to work best for you. But anyway, I don't know if you can see, this is the overall look we've got going. Here's a block that's just about done with all of the curved parts done. So I'm going to do that across the whole quilt, and then we'll do something in these bigger sections. Again, it's probably going to be a small feathered wreath, I would think. I'll see how I feel when I get there. Anyway, that's what's on the agenda for today, and I'll come back and show you some more progress when we get there. Well, I know not everybody has seen how one of these old shuttle machine works, and I thought it might be interesting to show you. There's two slide plates that cover the bobbin area. This one in the back is usually not needed to remove, but I took it out so you could see the arc here that creates the space where the shuttle goes back and forth. So when I turn the treadle, you can, I don't know if you can see this, but you see that's the action. This guy flies back and forth, and here's the bobbin case that fits into that shuttle. So let me put my back plate back on and bring this forward. This slides into, or just sort of drops in to that. Now if I turn my wheel, this brings the thread up, and that's all there is to it. So that's how the bobbin and everything loads into that. And once you've got it set, the sewing is the same. The only difference is you wind your bobbins differently, and the bobbin case looks different. One disadvantage to these is that those long bobbins don't hold as much thread as a class 15 Singer bobbin, or even a 66. This is the style of bobbin you're probably much more used to seeing. That holds a lot more thread than one of those shuttle bobbins. But once you're loaded, the actual sewing is virtually the same. The only other thing I should note, most newer machines don't hardly ever want you to put any oil in them. And just in very selected spots, they tell you to, they might tell you to oil it. Some say don't oil it at all, take it to the dealer. You have to follow your instructions. But in these old ones, there's a frequent need for oiling. And in this one, there's a spot right here where there's a felt pad that's in there, and that you keep saturated with oil, and that keeps the shuttle track, the race for the shuttle, sort of lubricated. So you put oil in there, and then there's several other oiling points, and periodically I take it out of the treadle, tip it up, and oil the bottom, and so regular oiling on these old machines is a lot more of a deal than it is with newer machines. But the gearing and everything is pretty darn sturdy. When they're not working, it's hardly ever a problem that there's a little tiny bit of lint in there. These things are built like I just thought you might like to see how the bobbin parts work. But the actual sewing itself is pretty much the same as any other.
There's one other thing that you might find interesting. Here's a few of my other sewing machines. I've got another rack that sized full also, and then there's about, so I don't know, 8 or 9 that are in cabinets. So I have a lot to choose from, but it's part of the fun is playing with different machines. Well, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I have marked a circle in the middle of the blue block. What I used is a roll of masking tape to make the size, and I used my one of my chalk pencils to trace it on there. It's pretty faint, but that's really all I need to make a wreath here. And I'll start by bringing out my thread, and we'll do a once around to get the wreath shape. And then I'll go back and put some feathers on it. Now, I could be very careful and draw out a template and mark this perhaps more accurately, but I feel pretty confident with being able to get it relatively uniform without marking. As long as all my center circles are the same size, I think all of my wreaths will come out pretty close to the same. A couple of reasons that I'm not marking. One, it's a pain in the neck. Two, there's always the issue of washing the markings out, and it's easier not to have to worry about it. And the third reason is it takes time if I don't have to mark. Now that might sound somewhat lazy, but the fact is you can spend hours and hours marking a quilt, and so if you get to the point where you can do it without, you save yourself a ton of time. Now, it all depends on the overall effect you're going for. Certainly, just going at it freehand and just trying to be close enough is probably not your best approach if you're going for a show quilt. You want to be a little more conscious of uniformity. But I think practice. It's not that hard to get them to look pretty good, pretty uniform, without the need for marking. So it's up to you. The procedure's the same. On the stitching, it's just how much you need to do beforehand. But anyway, there's a, well, I'll try to show you a little better. I don't know if you can see it with this thread. I don't get much contrast on the blue. Once this quilt is done, I'm also going to wash it, and that tends to cause, because I've got cotton batting, the batting itself will shrink a little bit, and that draws it up, and it'll create more dimension, and the quilting will actually show more after it's been quilted, or after it's been washed. But anyway, that's the basic idea. And as I look at this, I see that, because of the way the shapes are here, it doesn't fill in all of the space. So I think I'm going to go around and do an arc around each of these two to sort of just help to bring this this area a little more securely down to the edge. But anyway, that's how I'm going to do the quilting in the open blocks, and then we'll do the borders next.